Hey guys, so as I talked before with respect to our support of the Operation Underground Railroad, you've seen where I show you the campaign on the website. I talk about that we will donate $50 towards every transaction we do. Now I wanted to bring on to, I guess as a show, you can call it that, Tim Ballard, the guy who founded it. If you ever watched the documentary Operation Two Saints, all about his start into this and what his experience has been. So he can share with us a little bit about what our contribution has done and more detail about what he's experiencing all the time. So check it out and stick around for a little bit of information after. So I just appreciate you coming on and spending the time. I wanted the main goal that I'm looking to accomplish here, one, of course, bring more awareness to what you guys have and the statistics and those kind of things, but also, and I've got a list of some questions here, but mainly to those people who support my business, who have contributed to not only the campaign we've got, but ensuring that we have business so we can keep contributing and meet the goals that we have. I wanted them to know where it goes. And so because sure, you get to hear about OUR, you get to hear about the Nazarene Fund, and it feels so far removed from people that it's hard to quantify their contribution. And so I want to be able to quantify their contribution. So guys, you're making a dent. Sometimes it's just a small ding, but it's a dent. I mean, if you want to go into a little bit of history, what got you where you're going, that's cool. But for the mainly, I want to just get a few questions and give people an idea where their contribution is doing.
Excellent.
So from what I understand, you had a year with the CIA back in 2000, right? And then
yeah, it was insignificant, really. It was just my first job, and I left pretty quick. So I would just start with, I spent 12 years as a special agent with Homeland Security, because that's where I got into trafficking. And
that's that's basically where you got your feet underneath you, right? I mean, yeah. The CIA was kind of an intro into the federal law enforcement, then get into Homeland Security, working directly with ICE, correct, for that number of years, and then something happened where, and most people can find the story, but something happened that you were tapped to say you should start working on this.
Correct.
So I wanted to kind of hit on how large the industry of human trafficking is. What are the statistics with respect to the different segments, right? You got sex slavery, you've got organ harvesting, you've got that kind of stuff. Of course, how has I want to get into the liberal culture that we've got, and I'll just touch on it, that we have, and that the instant access to things that people want. How has that impacted this industry? And then, of course, how when people donate to OUR and the Nazarene Fund, and just I don't know if they realize how those funds are utilized. So it'd be good to have that explained. And then what is it you guys need to be able to fight these battles? I mean, what do we need to target? When we're out there campaigning this and we're out there bringing awareness, where does our target need to be? And then final words that you have for the folks, and then anything else you think we should touch.
Excellent. So yeah, let's start with how big the problem is. According to the UN and the U.S. State Department Trafficking in Persons report, it's about $150 billion a year business. So that's roughly about, to put context to that, it's like with the amount of money that is exchanged every year in selling women, men, and children, you could buy every Starbucks franchise, every NBA team, and still have enough left over to send every American child to college. So,
and that's all together. That's everything together. It's not like each individual one, right? This is all of those things together.
Everything together, the buying and selling of people, modern day slavery, human trafficking. Now, to break the numbers down, the vast majority is slave labor.
Okay.
And altogether, it's estimated that there's about 37 million people altogether who are currently enslaved. That's way more than any other time in the history of the world. Of course, population too. But yeah, it's that many people, and then about 10 million of those are sex slavery, and then of the 10 million, 2 million are children. I mean, I don't want to make the 2 million number sound small because it's the smallest, and that it's huge, right? That's,
Well, I mean, 2 million people, that's a massive city. That's not a small number whatsoever. It seems small because how large the number is as a whole.
yeah,
But then it just gets to understanding, look how big the damn number is as a whole.
yeah.
Right. And it's not just the sex piece of it. There's so many other things going on too. For some reason, I think that we as a society have somehow wrapped our head around the fact that there's human trafficking when it comes to the sex industry. And I don't know why, but for some reason that has actually been kind of almost like so lacquered over that it doesn't affect people. But there's other parts of it, right? There's the labor piece. And what are the other things that are I guess part of this industry?
So slave labor, we'll start with that. That's the biggest. And this is just people like this kind of slave labor that you might imagine. People are owned by other people and forced to work for free, or wages that are so ridiculous that it's the same thing. Or what they'll do is, we've seen this a lot, the cases where they lure people in, women to say women are 4 times more likely to be trafficked than children. And they'll lure them. In fact, we just worked a case not long ago where over 10 women were lured out of Venezuela. The traffickers took advantage of the collapsed economy, lured them out, and promised them jobs. That was the lure. Promised them jobs in another country that was a resort town, and they thought they were going to be able to take care of their kids. They had 15 kids amongst all of them. So they get to that place and their passports are taken to process, right? And in fact, stolen. And then some of them reported that they were drugged up, but they all ended up against their will in another country where they don't speak the language, and they wake up as slaves and immediately are told, or are sexually abused and told, this is your new life. So then they give them a false hope that they can get out of this by telling them, for every John that, every client that has sex with you for money, then we'll take that out of your debt. But they start with a debt. They charge them for the flight. They charge them for the food. They charge them for, for the rent.
Anything they can think of.
Yeah, and they make sure that, like, hey, if you want to sell your body, you better look good, but you got to use our people. If you're the makeup, hair people, whatever. And they say we could get that for like 1/5 of the cost outside. Nope, you got to use ours. So they just make sure, and they just keep adding that to the bill, and they never get the money. The money's always paid to the pimp or the trafficker, and not to the survivor. So they never get out of debt. They in fact they say, I'm just getting more and more in debt.
Yeah, it's designed for them to never see the light of day, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a very common way. And also, we distinguish slave labor and sex slavery. Really, once you're a slave labor, the chances that you will eventually be sexually assaulted are pretty high.
Yeah.
Because once if you're willing to own someone, you're a bad person. And once that person's property to you, why not? You could do whatever you want with them. We have cases, we've been able to repatriate over 300 women from the Middle East who went over on the same kind of situation where they were lured into thinking they were going to have a good job. Instead, they're slave labor, passports taken again, not treated well, not just the same kind of story. And then eventually we hear the stories about, once I was owned by them, they would tell me to go sexually service their teenage boy, or
wow,
stuff like that. So eventually they'll, once you're a slave,
once you're owned, you're owned. They're going to do whatever they want with you, and it's and I think it's helpful to paint the picture. It's not something people want to hear. It's not people, I think, that it's tough to listen to, but it's something I think people need to understand. They need to know it's out there. They can't leave in a conversation like this. They can't leave anything that they see on YouTube that has Tim Ballard associated with it and say they didn't know anymore. You can choose to ignore it, but you can't say you didn't know. Yeah. And I think that's the whole point, making sure people know. So there's that. I know that you talked a lot about, the organ harvesting and like, what was it? Human sacrifice. I mean, there's some amazing things that you guys are having to experience from your side of it. And I can't even begin to understand how you cope or any of that kind of stuff. But I appreciate you talking about and being willing to continue to talk about it. What do you think our culture, the U.S. culture, being continually more and more sexually liberated with instant access to whatever it is they want, to instant gratification, how does that contribute to this?
Well, it goes to demand, right? Like, why are there so many just children? Why are there 2 million children who are available in the commercial sex trade? And you got to go to the demand. What kind of demand would justify that number, and how is that demand created? And the United States is generally in the top 1 or 2 for consumption of child exploitation material, child rape videos. And so let's talk about that, right? Why is that? Why is it the United States has that? And when we go overseas and work with our law enforcement partners, they almost always ask us to play that role of the sex tours. Why? Because we look like the client that the traffickers are looking to serve. So what's happening is this over-sexualized culture where pornography is so readily available. When I was a kid, you couldn't even get it if you want. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to find it. Right?
We had to stumble into it. If I ever found it as a kid in the 80s, you had to literally not be looking, and it just happens to appear somewhere.
Exactly.
Very rarely.
I remember the few times that I bumped into it, and it was like, whoa, this magazine,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 2-second look, and you're like, whoa, what did I see? Can you imagine? There's not one teenager that hasn't seen it on their phone, or it's just right there, and it's gruesome, and it's super intense kind of material, right? So what happens to the brain, and the science in this is really pretty compelling, that the brain responds to pornography like your brain responds to a drug. It drops a dopamine load, and that becomes the addiction, is the dopamine hit that you want. And so just like marijuana, where eventually that chemical reaction in the brain isn't working as well because you're using marijuana so much, then you go to something that will stimulate that reaction. You go to cocaine, you go to heroin, something stronger. Well, the same can be said of sexual material, right?
Yeah.
Pretty soon the adult stuff isn't going to do it for you because your brain is no longer functioning in a way that you get that dopamine hit. So you need it so bad that you're going to start looking online for 17 and 15, then 14. And then pretty soon you are in completely stuck in a world where you're abusing children. Right? With online, you could become a contact offender. So the United States, being that we have such a large population and that population has easy access to the internet, I think that explains why we are the largest consumer. And it's really education. People need to be educated. Not only the vulnerable kids, right, who become targets of traffickers because they're showing so much skin, or they're being taught to be over sexualized.
Yeah.
I mean, and even in our schools, it's very disturbing, this trend of trying to teach our younger children about the benefit, like young kids in elementary school. There's a push to bring up masturbation and talk about sexual organs, and at such a young age, you don't want to do that because you're desensitizing them to sexuality, which then by the time they're 13 and 14, they're feeling like they understand this and they're part of it, and they're showing skin, and now they become a target to traffickers who invite them to a photo shoot, or whatever it is, lure them, the lure. Or these young boys who are so sexualized, they are candidates to become abusers, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is, it's this over-sexualization that is creating the demand, in my opinion.
And I can see that when you're starting getting that wiring going that early in life, that wiring only builds upon itself, as we found in all kinds of things. I talk about that a lot in the business side. If you really want something, you got to think it, you got to believe it, you got to write it down, then you got to move your ass towards it. we're creating that, like you're saying, at a very, very young age. And where are they going to head with their life? What ends up becoming, you're talking about people that are slaves to feed that monkey, if you will. Well, that monkey actually creates slavery of the individual who is the consumer, because they are slaves to that. There was a story that I actually, one of the books that I published about a guy at within our industry, our company. Now, I was talking to one of the executives who was a friend of mine, and seeing how his day was going, and he says, I've got a crappy day ahead of me. I got to fire somebody. I'm like, well, for what? And he goes, well, he's been on the internet looking at stuff he shouldn't be. Well, then after a few days go by, I say, hey, how'd it go? Did you have to fire that guy? He goes, no, I didn't have to fire him. I'm like, well, what happened? Did he quit? He goes, no, the cops showed up and arrested him because the stuff he was looking at work was that bad that they were taking him out. So ultimately, he became a slave to the need, and creating slavery as a result. So I know this is difficult to have to talk about and to get into. What do you guys need to fight these kind of battles? I mean, well, one, let's go back real quick. We've been able to touch the hearts of many people that are contributing with us and helping us to build our business, contribute. How do you use those resources?
Well, so we're talking about the cause and the demand, and there's great organizations out there who are fighting that, and I kind of envision them upstream, and we get involved in that a little bit, but our specialty is we're downstream, right? We're not upstream. We're downstream where the waterfall is falling into its last leg, right?
Yeah.
And those who didn't get rescued before, and we end up bodies falling off, and we capture and resuscitate as many as we can.
Yeah.
So we go into dark places. I just reported yesterday about an operation that happened in May of a little boy who was kidnapped by ISIS back in 2014. He was 9 years old. And the father was fighting with the Peshmerga against ISIS and found out that his entire family had been kidnapped. And he thought they were all gone. He eventually became a refugee and got out of there. But then our Nazarene Fund operators in May found his son, who's now 16, and he had been living and being trained by ISIS to become a warrior, a suicide bomber, whatever they're training him to do. And luckily, we got him out and got him back with his dad, and we just did a video. You can go on the Nazarene Fund, at the Nazarene Fund, to learn about that. But that's the kind of stuff we do. Our guys went in deep, undercover, dangerous to extract this kid. And so that's the kind of work that we do at OUR as well. We always work with law enforcement, and it was empower law enforcement to do the rescues. That's the idea. But we can help them. We help them by supplying the training, the equipment, the operators that they need that they then command on the ground, who are their undercover teams. So that's the kind of work that we do. It's really the aggressive approach, going right to the problem, going into the darkness, and empowering law enforcement to get those kids out. And then once they're out, we take care of them. So a lot of our budget goes to the aftercare and making sure they have all the basic needs that they need to be healed.
So and when people think about this, you put some thought to it, folks who are watching this. Think about all the resources that are needed just to get people on location. Then you have to take care of their temporal needs while they're there to keep them alive and doing the job. And then of course you got to pay for all the expense to get them undercover. You can't just have a guy just walk in off the street. They got to go through some sort of form of prep work.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we get here. I see people criticize us when we say, how could it possibly cost $50,000 to rescue a child or one child or 20 children? And it's like, it can cost a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Like,
when you guys told me 50 grand, I'm like, that you guys are able to pull it off for that little?
Well, if people are ignorant to what goes into a rescue operation, this is not just, you don't just walk into an orphanage and take a kid's hand and walk away.
Yeah.
Right? What are you going to do with that? It has to be official. It has to be through law enforcement, through the government authority. You also want to catch the bad guys. So this is a multi-pronged investigation that goes months and months sometimes. And every time you take a trip and you bring your team down, right there that's very expensive. And you're taking care of a team down there. There's some perspective. I knew a man whose son was kidnapped in a foreign country, and he called a private military company to help find him. He said that it was about $500,000 just to begin to talk, just to get boots on the ground And then then the invoices really start coming in. So we actually, being a nonprofit, we do this for very cheap. Of course, we're doing this for people who would never.
You're doing it for a higher cause than a gun for hire.
Exactly. And for kids who otherwise would have no hope. There's no parent.
Yeah.
So that's the money goes to training and recruiting and the operation itself.
So what do we need to be cognizant of as we're talking about this and pushing this out there that you guys have the greatest need for?
Well, our greatest need is we want to expand, we want to grow, we want to build an endowment that makes sure we can continue this work in forever. But we are in 25 countries right now. Honestly, my goal is to have brick and mortar, like OUR embassies in every one of those countries. We've been able to pull that off in certain places, and it's so effective because then they're just there. They're constantly working with the local authorities and we're being that support to them.
I'm definitely with you. Do we have? I mean, what kind of? Well, maybe I don't want to get into politicizing anything. I was going to ask if there was any sort of like, as far as embassies or any help from the U.S. on that, but I probably won't go down that path because who the heck knows how that will travel, right? That can get pretty deep when you get to those things. But I know your time is very, very short. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to everybody and kind of explain a little bit more on where that goes to. But is there any final parting words you want to share with those who are watching?
I would just ask people to get involved in some way. Let yourself be converted to the cause, because go on and learn about it. Watch documentaries. We have a lot of footage you can look at, videos and whatnot, and then while you're doing it, ask yourself, what can I do? Just like that's what you did, Aaron. I mean, you saw the film and you looked at our footage and you started getting an understanding, and then you said, here's what I'm gonna do, right? That's what I love when people just say, we're gonna do this, and you and your team have put together amazing opportunities for us, introduced us to some players. And that's what we want people to do, is be proactive on their own, because you'll know before I know what it is you can do, who it is and then just talking about it is so key, because the more people that stand up, and I don't care if they support us or any number of groups, there's 100 ways to fight this thing, and if everyone does it, we can rescue so many more and hopefully end this.
Yeah, and like I encourage everybody in the past, go to Amazon Prime, check out Operation to Saint. You'll see a lot of the history here that we can't get into because of time. But if you're not looking to start a campaign, I will continue to carry the torch. When I go to the grave, I'm coming in hot. And one of these things that I'm gonna be doing is this for the rest of my existence. And of course, deeper involving you guys, I know that I'll be seeing you later on in the month up in Utah, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity to hang out with you guys a little bit more. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that people don't quite understand what you put forth. It's not just time or energy. Your soul is in this, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you, Aaron. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So hopefully that conversation was of value to you, and gives you a little bit, inspires you a little bit more to take up the cause that we're doing here. If you want to donate, just go to aaron.chapman.com, scroll down and click on the donate button. It'll take you right to the campaign. Also, just know every time we do a transaction with you, we're donating $50 to every transaction we do. Every time you do one, we'd appreciate you doing the same as what we're doing. Matching that contribution. Every little bit's going to make a big difference. Just with what we've been able to contribute so far, like he said in the video or in our conversation, $50,000 covers a full mission. Well, we're close to 1 to 2 full missions covered just what we raised between September till now. So we appreciate the support, appreciate the trust, and we'll get back to you guys here soon with some market stuff at the end of the week.